Today we're going to read Spaghetti and Meatballs for All, a mathematical story written by Marilyn Burns. One fine day, Mrs. Comfort was busy tending the lettuce patch in her garden. "You know, it's been a long time since we've seen the family," she said to her husband. "You're right," answered Mr. Comfort. He was stretched out on a bench, doing what he liked to do best in a vegetable garden, reading a cookbook. "Maybe it's time for a family reunion," Mrs. Comfort said. "A wonderful idea," Mr. Comfort agreed. Let's see. Menus, dinner for 2, serves 4 to 6, banquets. How many people would we be having?" he asked. The Comforts called their children. They called their parents. Mrs. Comfort called her brother. Mr. Comfort called the next door neighbors, who were almost like family. Everyone would come. "That's 32 people altogether, including us," Mr. Comfort said. What could possibly fit in our oven and still feed 32 people, he wondered out loud. "Why not make your famous spaghetti and meatballs?" asked Miss Comfort. "Good thinking," said Mr. Comfort. "Now, what about renting some tables and chairs?" asked Mrs. Comfort. She got out the telephone book. 2 weeks later, the big day arrived. Mr. Comfort got up very early and spent all morning cooking. He baked 16 loaves of garlic bread and made 8 pounds of fresh pasta. He simmered 8 quarts of spaghetti sauce and rolled 96 meatballs. Mrs. Comfort picked all of her ripe tomatoes, cucumbers, and lettuce for salad. While Mrs. Comfort waited for the chairs and tables she had rented, she drew a seating plan. Then she got out the dishes, the silverware, the glasses, the tablecloths, and some vases. But when the rental company arrived, they were 1 chair short. "Don't worry," said Mr. Comfort. "You'll think of something." Mrs. Comfort found a folding chair. Now the tables were ready. Each had 4 place settings, 4 chairs, and a vase with lovely cut flowers. Mr. Comfort came out of the kitchen balancing 8 plates of celery and olives, 1 for each table. Just after noon, the Comfort's daughter and her husband arrived with their 2 children. "Welcome," said Mrs. Comfort. "Come sit," said Mr. Comfort. "Let's push 2 tables together so you can sit with us," suggested the Comfort's daughter. "But there won't be room," Mrs. Comfort said. "But there is," said Mr. Comfort. "There's plenty of room and plenty of garlic bread." Everyone was just about to sit down when a car pulled into the driveway. Mrs. Comfort's brother and his wife and their daughter, her husband, and their twin sons all spilled out. "Welcome," said Mr. Comfort. "Sit down, sit down." "Oh, let's push over 2 more tables so we can all sit together," said Mrs. Comfort's brother's wife. The Comfort's daughter and husband got up to help. "But that won't work," said Mrs. Comfort. "You're so right," Mr. Comfort said. "We'll have to push 2 more tables together." "But that won't work either," said Mrs. Comfort. "You're right," said Mr. Comfort's brother's wife. "Make way!" shouted Mrs. Comfort's brother and the Comfort's son-in-law. They each carried over a table and put them side by side. "You don't understand," Mrs. Comfort sighed. "My plan was—" But no one heard her. Everyone was too busy. "Save some of that garlic bread for me," a new arrival called. "Me too, me too, me too," 3 more voices piped in. "Well, look who's here," said Mrs. Comfort's brother's daughter's husband. It was the Comfort's next-door neighbor with their daughter and son. "Hello, hello," said Mr. Comfort. "So glad to see you. Have a seat while I get some more garlic bread." "But there is no place for them to sit," said Mrs. Comfort. Oh, she's looking a little distraught. "Don't worry," said Mrs. Comfort's brother's wife. "We'll just divide these tables into 2 groups of 4. "Go ahead," Miss Comfort said, "but I'm telling you when—" "You fret too much," said Mr. Comfort. "Bread, anyone?" Look, she's still trying to show everybody her plan. When all of the tables had been rearranged, everyone sat down. "See, Mom," the Comfort's daughter said, "it worked out just fine." Mrs. Comfort sighed. Hiya, 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 boomed a familiar voice. Mr. Comfort's father, mother, and their little terrier strolled in. Hello, Grandma. Hello, Grandpa, the Comfort's daughter shouted. Oh, dear, said Mrs. Comfort. Where are they going to sit? She's covering her eyes. She just can't look. No problem, said Mr. and Mrs. Comfort's next-door neighbor. If we just push all 8 tables into one long line, there'll be enough room for everyone. Actually, Mrs. Comfort began to explain. Absolutely, said Mr. Comfort. He was carrying several big bowls of salad. Better move fast or this salad will really be tossed. No sooner had everyone gotten settled than Mrs. Comfort's mother and father drove up in their yellow convertible. Hello, Grammy. Hello, Gramps, the Comfort's daughter shouted. Mrs. Comfort put down her fork. Oh, dear, she said. Don't worry. We're all family, right? Gramps said. Let's just split this long line of tables in 2. There'll be plenty of room for us to squeeze in. But it's still not going to work because, Mrs. Comfort started to say. A bowl of salad slipped into her lap. Sorry, said one of Mrs. Comfort's brother's daughter's twin sons. Mr. and Mrs. Comfort and their 18 relatives and neighbors were finally all seated. They passed the salad and the bread. They shared the celery and the olives. And when they heard a cheery, "Hi, everyone," most of them held on to their plates. The Comfort's son and wife pedaled in on a bicycle for 2. Their twin daughters rolled in on skates. Didn't I tell you, Mrs. Comfort? There's still not enough room, she said. No problem, Mom, said the Comfort's son. We'll just divide these 2 lines of tables into 4 pairs. Okie dokie? Wait, you're all forgetting something, said Mrs. Comfort. We're out of salad over here, the Comfort's daughter said. Don't put any tomatoes in mine, said the Comfort's neighbor's son. Is there more garlic bread? Asked Mrs. Comfort's mother. Who got my silverware? Asked Mr. Comfort's father. Hey, Mrs. Comfort's brother's daughter's son said to his twin brother, that's my bread you're eating. Get your fingers out of my salad, the Comfort's son's daughter said to her twin sister. Don't play with your food, said the Comfort's son's wife. What did you say? Asked Mr. Comfort. I said, Mrs. Comfort said. Oh, she's trying to get them to understand. Beep, beep, a big red van parked at the curb. Out jumped Mrs. Comfort's sister with her husband and their triplets. All 3 of the triplets had brought their boyfriends, who were also triplets. Now, don't you see what I mean, Mrs. Comfort asked. Where are they going to sit? Well, my dear, said Mr. Comfort, I haven't served the spaghetti yet. We'll just move a few chairs, reset a few places, and there'll be plenty of room for everyone. I give up, cried Mrs. Comfort. She sat down in her chair and she didn't budge. I think she's getting a little frustrated. I say we divide the 4 pairs of tables into 8 single tables, Mrs. Comfort's brother said. He and his wife moved 1 pair of tables apart. The triplets and their boyfriends moved the other 3 pairs. You see, Mr. Comfort said, it all worked out. I see everything is back exactly the way I had it, said Mrs. Comfort. I knew you'd think of something, said Mr. Comfort. Now, how many meatballs would you like? So all of that work, they moved all the tables to try to make everyone fit. And what they should have done is agreed with Miss Comfort and left them the way they were in the beginning. Now I want to talk to you about those table arrangements and a new vocabulary word, perimeter. If we take a look at the original arrangement that Mrs. Comfort had, it was to seat 32 people. If you remember the line that Mr. Comfort said in the story, that's 32 people altogether, including us. So Mrs. Comfort called and ordered 8 tables and arranged each table to have 4 chairs. So what is the math? 8 times 4 equals 32. So she has just enough seats for the 32 guests that are coming to the spaghetti dinner. This is Mrs. Comfort's original arrangement, but something happened in the story. There was a problem. What was the problem in the story? I'm going to give you a moment to think about it. The problem was everyone wanted to sit together. As more guests arrived for the spaghetti dinner, the party, they wanted to sit with each other. So they kept trying to rearrange and move the tables so that they could sit together. But there was a constraint. And what is a constraint? A constraint is a factor that limits what you are able to do. So I'm going to give you a moment to see if you can figure out what the constraint for this problem might be. Great job. The constraint is Mrs. Comfort only ordered 8 tables. You can only work with what you have. So they kept trying to rearrange those 8 tables to be able to seat all the guests as they were arriving because everyone wanted to sit together to enjoy that great spaghetti dinner. When the first 4 guests arrived, which was Mrs. Comfort's daughter, her husband, and 2 kids, they decided to push 2 tables together so that they could sit and enjoy each other's company. So when they pushed the 2 tables together, they now had a group of tables that would hold 6 people. When that happened, what was the effect of the arrangement that Mrs. Comfort had originally? We now only had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tables that can seat 4 people. If we do the math, 6 times 4 equals 24. So those tables could hold or seat 24 people. With the 6 that were there, that equals 30 because 24 plus 6 we know equals 30. But how many people were coming to the spaghetti dinner? 32. 32 minus 30 equals 2, so they lost 2 chairs for people to be able to sit. As Mrs. Comfort said, there's not enough room for everybody. We know in the story that 6 more people showed up. So let's find out how many people total we have. The 6 plus the new 6 that showed up, 6 plus 6 equals 12. So they added 4 more tables to the group. If you take a look at this new arrangement, those 4 tables that were added to the original group of 2 only holds 10 people. 12 minus 10 equals 2. They don't have enough room. They figured that out, but before they could add more tables, what happened in the story? 4 more people showed up. What's our total now? 12 plus 4 equals 16. They decided to split the tables into 2 groups. Here's the first one, and here's the second one. I'm going to give you a moment. Count how many people can sit at each table. Great. 8 people can sit at each group of tables, and we have 2 groups. 2 times 8 equals 16. They had made a good arrangement and a good decision because 16 people were now at the spaghetti dinner, and they could have an arrangement that seated 16 people. So for now, they have enough. But what do we know happens in the story? 2 more people show up. What is our total? 16 plus 2 equals 18. So they decided to rearrange the tables to make one long line. Count real quick. How many people can sit at that long line of tables? Perfect, 18. Hopefully no one else will show up, but we know what happens in the story, don't we? 2 more people show up again. What's our total count now? 18 plus 2 equals 20. So they decided to take the long line of tables and split it in half. How many groups do we have? We have 2, and I'm going to give you a moment to count how many people can sit at each group. Correct. There's 10. 2 groups of 10 equals 20. So we know that they have enough room. In our story, though, people keep coming. 4 more people show up. So what is our total now? 20 plus 4 equals 24. So they decide to split the tables to make 4 groups of 2 tables. As you can see, 6 people can sit at each group of tables. What is our total? 4 times 6 equals 24. Great. They're still doing good rearranging those tables, keeping up with everybody as they show up. For now, they have enough, but what happens in our story? The last 8 people arrive. So I'm going to give you a moment to think, what should you do? You may remember what they did in the story, but if not, let's talk about patterns. There were patterns that happened throughout the story as they were rearranging tables. So when the last 8 people arrive, 24 plus 8 equals 32. They have to find a way to arrange the tables so that 32 people can sit and eat that wonderful spaghetti dinner and those meatballs and garlic bread. So let's talk about the patterns real quick. The first pattern that you should have seen as we walk through these arrangements is to add tables together in a group, you have to take away chairs. This makes the number of people that can sit at a group of tables smaller. The second pattern that you should have seen is if you break apart a group of tables, you add chairs. This makes the number of people that can sit at a table larger. So what should you do? To be able to sit 32 people, you should have listened to Mrs. Comfort in the first place. She had the best arrangement, and that's what they ended up doing. They rearranged the tables back to the way Miss Comfort had it in the beginning. Let's talk for a moment about table arrangement and perimeter. I'm going to give you 2 different table arrangements, and we're going to talk about the perimeter and the area of those arrangements and what it means for a shape. This arrangement has an area of 8 square units. I know that because it is an array with 2 rows and 4 columns. Or if you think about the formula for area, area equals length times width. So 2 rows times 4 columns. 2 times 4 is 8. Or if you like it better, you can just count those squares. This arrangement also has an area of 8 square units. I know that because it is an array with 1 row and 8 columns. Again, area is length times width, so 1 row times 8 columns gives me an area of 8 square units. But what does this have to do with perimeter? The perimeter for this first table arrangement is 12 units. Just count the lines or the chairs where people can sit around the table arrangement. So the perimeter is 12 units and its area is 8 square units. What about my other arrangement? The perimeter here is 18 units. Again, just count those chairs all the way around because we know perimeter is the distance around. So our first arrangement has a perimeter of 12 units with an area of 8 square units. Our second arrangement has a perimeter of 18 units, but it still has the same area of 8 square units. So what is our takeaway from this lesson? Shapes with the same area can have different perimeters.